Business, the construction industry's innovation and technology show.
So welcome to the AEC Business Workshop on strategies for business success in modular construction. I have here a fantastic team of experts ready to discuss how to successfully build, operate, and grow a modular construction business, and specifically for housing. The workshop attendees are Andrew Staniforth, CEO at Assembly. Welcome, Andrew.
Howdy.
Guido Maciocci, founder at AECFoundry. Hi,
Hello.
Guido.
Hi.
Henry Salo, CEO at Fira Modules.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
And Renee Puusepp, founder at Creatomus Solutions.
Hello, everyone. Looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, and my name is Aarni Heiskanen. I'm from AEC Partners and AE Partners and AEC Business and a construction innovation agent. Maybe you know me from my podcasts and my blogs. But maybe before I begin this workshop, I give our experts a chance to explain how their work relates to modular construction. Andrew.
Sure. So I'm Andrew. I am the CEO of Assembly OSM. We're based here in New York. And how does our work relate to modular construction? We build modular buildings. So our sweet spot is in the mid to high rise in major urban markets. So let's think about type 1 construction in markets like New York. Right now, we're focused on 10 to 30 story multifamily buildings, everything from condos to affordable housing.
Very good. Well, Renee.
Yes, thank you, Aarni. I'm Renee, so I'm a CEO of Creatomus Solutions. We build software for rapidly designing and costing modular buildings. And my background is in architecture, so I also design modular buildings, and I'm more of a system architect. So we have designed the world's first open source volumetric modular construction system called Tracecycle.
Fantastic. Okay, Henry.
All right. I'm Henry Salo, CEO of Flow Modules. And Flow Modules focuses on, basically we have two dimensions in our offering, how we approach the modular construction. We have the bathroom pod, which is our main product. So we developed that and an ecosystem around it. And then we have a service called Site Factory, where we basically bring the factory-like working methods on site, because that's our idea that by combining these two, our customer gets the most value out of the modular construction.
Yeah, I actually have covered your Site Factory on one of my podcasts, if you're interested. Guido.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Guido Maciocci, founder of AECFoundry, a boutique tech consulting agency, and we help AEC companies leverage technology and build custom software to enable more connected, more efficient, and more data-driven workflows across design, engineering, manufacturing, and construction. One of these companies having been Assembly OSM. It's great to see you again, Andrew.
You too, Guido.
Okay. Yeah, and how am I connected with any of this? I'm originally an architect, and I designed a lot of modular buildings in office buildings and residential and so on. So I have some experience, and also one airport terminal, actually, we were designing. Okay, so the idea here is that we will have a workshop setting here, and I have set up a, let's say, canvas or a mind map, which we can use to as a tool for our discussion, and I will share it now for everybody to see. So here it is. And let's start with, so this is our structure of our workshop. First of all, our mission today is to help anybody who is considering modular as a business model, modular construction, and specifically for housing? What kind of issues there you have to consider, what kind of strategies and so on, and that's our mission here today. Let's start with the definition. What is modular construction? Modular construction in general is something that you prefabricate building sections or modules or components off-site and then assemble them on-site. This is the basic idea of modular, and there are several types of modular construction. Something that we do a lot of here in Finland is panelized construction, panelized with concrete and wood. Volumetric modular, which means that you have spaces, actually parts like those pots that Henry mentioned, components for different types of things, for example, HVAC components or any type of components that are prefabricated, even on site nowadays. Then we have relocatable buildings. In some cases, those are perfect solutions, even for, let's say, something that stays for a longer time, that just temporary buildings. And then, of course, hybrid solutions, which can be combination of any of these and the, let's say, non-modular construction. So those are the types of things that we're discussing today. A business model is always an interesting question when it comes to any type of construction. What is our business model? How do we make the products and services? How do we provide the products and services? How do we make money, basically? So I have some ideas of business models here. There are several models that we can look at. There are turnkey solution providers who can provide the whole package from end to end. Manufacturing partners, these are something companies that manufacture, for example, panels or volumetric modules. Design build firms that use modular for those kind of projects. Developer builder. Leasing and rental services, maybe mainly for those ready-made buildings. Product suppliers that supply the supply chain or part of the supply chain, and different type of franchises, basically franchising the concept or technology or the whole package. So there are many models to choose from, let's say. Here are some of those. I'd like to ask our workshop at first, when you're, let's say, imagine you're in a situation where you're seeing that you have a market where there's demand for housing, maybe affordable housing or any type of housing, and you think that modular is the way to go. What kind of criteria would you have for when you think about these different kind of business models? How would you evaluate what's the right way to proceed?
I think we'll all be a little biased based on what our own business models are. But from it, the way I think about this is it depends on what market you're entering and what problem you're solving by going the modular route, right? So in certain markets, like what we focus on, high cost markets, urban, like New York City, the problem we're solving for is the cost of on-site labor and how unavailable it is, right? So if you're solving for labor, it pushes you to say, well, how do you move labor off-site? And then what does that sort of mean for your business model? For us, it means going volumetric and then also being a turnkey design builder. So we kind of like, touch on two of those. And the reason that we're sort of in that vein is in the ecosystem in the markets that we're in, right? Where you have very sophisticated customers, right? Our customers are big, large developers, $100+ million projects. The things that have sunk modular projects in the past in these markets has been around coordination. It's been around the ability to get financing and concentration risk on the business model. And I think so that has pushed us into a certain direction, right? I think if you are a supplier or a panel builder or, et cetera, all these other business models, you can have a very good business, but you have to be very cognizant of like what the customer you're selling to wants and what is going to hold them up from adoption. So for us, right, being a turnkey design builder allowed us to shortcut all of that, have a single point of contact with the developer, one contract, design build agreement, and then we're off to the races. But I do think it's nuanced depending on what market you go into.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think that is a perfectly valid idea to understand what the customer wants. But still, how many customers would you say in general? Do you have any idea how often do customers themselves propose a modular construction solution? Or is it something that you are kind of pushing? Is there pull or push?
Maybe I can try to answer here. I think from my point of view, it's always a push. The client rarely comes and asks for a modular building. They ask for certain qualities or certain quantities. So yeah, and then maybe they actually reflect back to the criteria from that point of view. Is actually it's asking yourself what is actually fixed in my model. So what's actually fixed in my business model? Is it actually the region I'm delivering to, or is it the construction method? Is it actually the building typology or type of a client? What is fixed? Because if everything is fluent, then you can't really choose the model. In my opinion, you have to fix certain criteria. For example, a location. If you choose your market and the building typology, then I think the next question is, who are your competitors for this market? And once you know your competitors and their strengths, it's actually asking yourself, so what is your advantage or what's your unique selling point? And that begs the next question. So what is actually what sort of model do I choose?
Okay, yeah. So what is fixed in your business model? Yeah, very good point of view. How would you, Henry, how did you come up with the model that you have nowadays?
Perhaps if I try to add on to answer that and add for the point of criteria for selecting the model. So whenever you're building modular, you're building modules or pods or something, you always need to offset the cost of organizing the building or the construction in some other location with some added value. And I think that in order to have a clear business model, you really need to think that in advance. For example, in a bathroom pod, we talk it openly with our customers that if you want the cheapest bathroom, you build it on site from scratch. You don't buy bathroom pods. But when you use bathroom pods, you can do other things that you otherwise would not be able to do. And to be very clear about those value points that you enable to your customer in order to offset that at cost, so that it's a win-win game for both. I think to be very clear about that is very important. Because in Finland, for example, there are some customers who sometimes they ask for a tender for bathroom pods because they think that it would be cheaper to get a bathroom. And we just have to disappoint them, that's not how it works. That's not the point of modular construction. So in order to tell that in advance and in a clear way to your customer really helps forward.
Yeah. We'll certainly discuss that more
I think there's also one additional
Yeah.
lens on the business model, which I do think is a little bit of a nuance, but I think important. It is, where are you in the business's life cycle? And the reason I bring that up is as it relates to the developer builder comment, right? So Assembly, our business model is a turnkey design builder, right? We step into the shoes of the architects, engineers, contractors, all the offsite, onsite, everything. But because we're doing something that is very new, right? High-rise urban construction in markets like New York, we are also, for our first buildings, being a developer. That is not our long-term business model because we're venture funded and building buildings with venture capital is very expensive, but it is the most important sales tool we have to walk a person or a developer or a team through one of our buildings, because the value proposition of what we're doing is very clear, right? Like, you can build a building in half the time, more sustainable, all these things that you can rattle off. But the big question for our customer's mind is, can you actually deliver on that value proposition? So for us, we've stepped in the shoes of the developer. We're building our first 2 buildings. And at the end of that, we will have people who can walk through these buildings and move away from that developer builder model into the turnkey design builder model. And then that will become the steady state. So I do think there's sort of like a temporal element to how people think about the evolution of their business models, depending on, again, the customer and what their skepticisms and perceptions are about your solution.
Yeah. It's a little bit like in software development. Sometimes when you develop software, you have to be like a consultant for the client also at the same time. But then finally, when you come up with a solution that you can reproduce at scale, then maybe that part will be unnecessary in the future. Maybe that's something that
Exactly.
if I understood it correctly. Yeah. All right. So what have we got here? We got here that we have very alternative models, but in fact, sometimes you have actually different roles depending on the life cycle of your business deciding on which model to pursue, it very much depends on the market, the problem, the customer, and what kind of things you can have fixed or flexible in the process. Okay, I think these were really valuable insights from you at this point. Well, let's move on to actually building the business. What would you say at the moment, if you're thinking that you have chosen your business model, you have some sort of idea that you will have customers who value, and you can provide value for both of you. What are the biggest, let's say, where do you start? What do you have to have good people, or have a technology that is really something different, or funding, of course, but where do you, what are the basic things that you have to have in place to start your business in modular specifically? Of course, every business has the same problems, but in modular, ideas on this?
If I can, say at least one thing, whenever we're talking about building homes, delivering prefabricated product or modules, the risks from the customer perspective are high, especially if you're a new company. So how you ensure that, well, as Andrew said, one solution is that you will be your own customer for before you can cross the chasm. For us, the Flow Modules was founded as under the umbrella of a construction company. So for the first 3-4 years, or even 5 years, we just practiced with our sibling company, who made the made the ownership supported decision to buy from us, and then that enabled us to learn to be good at what we're doing. Otherwise, I don't know if we would have been able to enter the market. So for us, that was the key enabler for building a modular business, at least for us.
So you become a provider for your owner, basically. Is that?
Yeah, or you have the first committed customer who will make everything in their power to help you succeed.
Yeah.
Because you know things are not going perfectly in the first time. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Maybe I can jump in here. So our motto is always put people first. Because with the right team, you can figure out the processes, you can build the technology, and you can get the funding. As you can say that the funding could come first, and then you start finding the right people. But you need to really kind of realize, I think it was mentioned before here also, is where are you at your business's life cycle? So, and your team needs to reflect this position in the business's life cycle. So, for example, if you're starting up, I would say that put more effort on digital skill set. So you actually figure out the digital product first, rather than start building the factory on day one. I think you want to figure out your product. So get the right people to figure out the product. So you need all of people who can cover, or whose skills can cover the entire, the life cycle from design to production and to maintenance maybe. Then but your team needs to reflect where are you and where do you start from, and then if you got the right team, then they will figure out the rest of it.
Okay, so in a way, somebody said that you shouldn't build a digital twin, but build a physical twin of the digital model. Maybe that's one way to approach. But yeah, that's a good point. But then, do you typically do you have to have some side of, let's say, maybe it's not in here, but I would say, is it some sort of a concept or something? It's not technology, but it's a concept. On a conceptual level, maybe you have to do some work before you can start.
I think related to the conceptual idea as well as the funding idea, you kind of have to decide what you want your business to be and what the roadmap for that business is going to be. And I know it sounds like of course you need to think about that, but I actually think that a lot of the modular companies that have gone out have not actually done that at the depth of what's necessary. And for example, we are venture funded. We made that decision to build a company that has venture scale. That is a very specific business model that has to have sort of power law dynamics, meaning you have to be able to return 10x, 20x of your investors' capital over a very short period of time. So if you are making that decision around the funding that you're going to do, you have to make sure there's a match for the actual business model, and then also a match to the roadmap that you have to get to that 10x outcome, right? So if your business is going to be something that is, we would call ourselves like capital light relative to most modular companies, but way more asset heavy than like a software business. But like we are going to be raising hundreds of millions of dollars. You need to have a plan in place for what you are de-risking at every fundraising milestone to make sure that you don't stop short on what you're trying to prove to get to that outcome, right? So like for us, we have a very like specific roadmap that we've been on around technical de-risking and regulatory approval. Then we moved into low volume production. Now we're moving into high volume production. Then there's geographic expansion. Like there's all of these steps, and they all require a different amount of capital. But we knew that going into sort of this decision around taking venture capital, that we were going to have to deliver a huge outcome at the end, and making sure everyone's aligned on that. I think a lot of modular companies start and immediately take venture capital and have not thought about what that actual like transaction means, right? Like you are going to be forced to scale in a way that if you don't know how to do that, you're just going to get your support pulled. And we've seen that now over the last, let's call it 6 to 12 months. So many venture-backed modular businesses have just lost their investor support because there was a mismatch in terms of the strategy they were on, the outcome they could produce, and the capital required to get to that outcome.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd like to pitch in here in terms of technology and process, and people's probably somewhere in between, sort of a Venn intersection there. I think a lot of modular housing companies, if not all modular housing companies, start from an architectural background and approach the problem as an architectural project, as opposed to sort of adopting product development methodologies and workflows that are closer to, industrial design or engineering or automotive or aerospace. And because of that, they inherit the tools and the methods of production in terms of digital tools and technologies and workflows that are part of the architectural industry and are absolutely not fit for purpose to deliver productized systems at scale. So I think it's probably not the number one priority, but I think modular companies and companies starting up in this area should definitely pay attention to how technology is developed outside of the AEC industry and make sure that they embed within their teams and their people and processes the same types of roles that are found outside to be able to build that technology in-house. So, something anecdotal but interesting is if you run a search on LinkedIn for any technology role, any classic technology role, CTO, CPO, product manager, product owner, and you filter it for construction as an entire industry, you'll probably come up with 0 results for job offerings. And that's both a symptom and a signal that the industry doesn't know how to build digital technology in-house. And the problem with that is that it relies on typical software development agencies that are great at developing software but know nothing about construction. And then most of the time is either spent trying to transfer over that knowledge, but it never really makes it across. And there's always this big divide between the two industries in terms of communication. So I think it's super important to pay attention to that as a new company, and make sure you have that covered in the right sort of way with the right sort of roles.
Yeah, I would second that completely. It is very hard to unwind the architectural thinking. It's very, very, very hard. And I think, Guido, you touched on this. It really comes down to getting the right team and the right balance on the team. And I think it's a dark art to get that done. And starting it early is way better than having to deal with having something out of proportion within a company.
But haven't we also seen some companies that have been founded by people from a completely different industry, that they imagine that you can use the same kind of approach in modular construction as you would do, for example, in smartphone building? Is that is also a problem sometimes?
Yeah,
So the
It's
balance
about the
is really, balance is really,
And it happens as well with startups that are completely from the software world, Silicon Valley types that are like, yeah, we crack Silicon Valley, we'll just develop a software that'll fix it. But it's an industry that is so complex that I wouldn't put my money behind any company that doesn't have a balance of expertise across those domains.
Yeah, definitely. No matter how good your product or your modular solution is, you will end up meeting the interface to the construction industry, and that's how you manage that interface. It's how you enter the market. So in the end, you have to have a strategy for that.
Yeah.
However, I would add here maybe that there are some strategies that we can actually borrow from the digital world and from the startup world. For example, if you actually start thinking about building your modular business, then you don't necessarily need to start from zero, right? You can actually rely on open source systems. So have a look around what's out there is my suggestion. See, actually, can you build on top of the shoulders of the giants? Can you actually not start from zero, but from 50 or 60 or from the 90th kilometer? So yes, just be wary what's out there and what you can already borrow without putting too much money or effort in it, and how you can develop your own business strategy on top of open source tools, because there are things out there like there's a WikiHouse, there are pattern buildings, they are all open source tools. You can actually take, or open source systems, sorry. So you can actually, if not use it directly, you can learn from it. And many companies do, they want to do everything by themselves. And I think that's where we got to learn from, startups that see what libraries and what software libraries can you borrow, what sort of industrial construction systems are out there that you can start with already. So you don't start by building a factory. So do the digital first. So if Aarni, you put down the concept there, I would say that start with the digital first concept rather than actually start. I mean, many companies actually start, okay, what sort of machines do I need? That's the wrong question in the beginning, in my opinion. So what market do you want to serve, and what's your product? And test it with digital first. Don't build it and see if anyone wants to buy it. Have a clever way of testing it without spending too much money on the product development.
It's like what is the MVP for a modular housing company? Is it physical or not? And Andrew can speak to this, because I mean, you guys, your prototypes, amazing. But I think the discussion, there is an even more interesting point here, which is how do you choose between, like, Assembly OSM, you guys are horizontally integrated in terms of your supply chain. Henry, you guys are vertically integrated in terms of you build your own stuff. How does that play into both the choice of a business model, but also in terms of what you said, Renee, which is based on the model, on the type of supply chain you choose, what is your MVP?
Completely agree.
Yeah, very good, very good.
One thing just on the MVP that I've been thinking a lot about, for a business like ours, I don't think we have a singular MVP, because there's so many different pieces of the business model that are brand new, right? So, and one thing around modular, offsite construction tech, anything in the category of like buildings, we don't have the luxury of like the Silicon Valley move fast and break things mentality, because if things break, people die, right? So we have to have 100% certainty at the end of an MVP that it actually will work. That is a really, really hard thing to do because innovation is messy, right? Like you don't know what the outcome's going to be when you start out on that exercise. So if you have a really tightly constrained endpoint where you know this building has to be safe, it has to pass code, right? Like it has to be beyond a doubt exactly what you want it to be. How much can you actually prove in that? So for us, like we've been very rigorous around a very like discrete de-risking on different pieces of the business model as we move, right? Like early in the business, it was like, can we get documents and systems approved by New York City? Then it was, can we test these like gating factors around will the Department of Buildings sign off on a building? Can we actually stack as fast as we think we can, 8 to 10 modules a day, right? Like all of these things that are binary, you test that in the smallest, the minimum viable product, but then you move on to the next minimum viable project where you're testing the next set of things until you get to at scale. But I do think that like it is a much harder innovation problem because you have these binary outcomes that like in software and like typical startup land, like you ship a bad product, your customers complain, you get a few bad reviews, you push an update and you're fine. We don't have that ability to do that. So it changes how we think about MVPs and that roadmap, et cetera, which is just often like it goes back to that like outsiders coming in versus insiders in the architecture, right? Like that's one of the things that I think has broken a lot of outsider-led modular companies. They come in with that Silicon Valley move fast, break things approach and don't realize that you actually can't break things. And that's where this like tension comes in. But I think that's probably one of the hardest challenges in the ramp up of a modular business.
Yeah, agree.
Right. Very good points here. And perhaps we should move on to discussing customer acquisition, because is it so that when you're building a modular business, you're actually kind of productizing construction? So you have a product. So do you have to market it as a product? I remember one it was one case where the idea first was that we are selling this modular product to consumers, but they found out that it was not the case. It was actually for developers who were the actual customers. So even the question of who is our customer can pivot somewhat. But what would you say about marketing and selling this kind of products or approaches? How does it differ from anything? Because is it just getting projects, or can you be proactive in marketing, for example?
Well, at least one thing to recognize is that if the modular product you're developing, or at least in our case, it is the case that because we want to emphasize standardized layouts for bathrooms. So for us, it creates difficulty because they have to be in the very beginning of the design process. So obviously it takes like 2 to 3 years before the construction even starts. And in order to have credibility as a bathroom pod manufacturer, we need to have enough references to be relied on. So I think that the overall customer acquisition strategy, in case, for example, in our case, we really had to understand these and, play along, there's no circling around it. These are just things you have to walk through and solve and build. There's no shortcuts. So at least that's on based on our experience.
I would say from our experience, the customer doesn't care about the product. They care about what the value they get from you. They actually see you as a service, not as a product usually. It depends, obviously, whether it's a business to customer or business to business. But business to business may care more about that you have your product and you've proven your value before with this. And coming back to these references, I think they're super important. But the references are the ones that help you to do the marketing, because you know that you got something to show. Otherwise, you just show pretty images. So showing the real stuff I mean, that must be. So you would start with service anyway in this case. Before you get built, I think there's no point of selling the product in my view, but maybe someone else have a different view.
No, I agree with you build it first. I think for us, we sell to developers, but we have a very strong belief around how, at least on the institutional side, real estate development decision-making works. And I think one of the things that a lot of modular and startups in the construction tech space sort of overlook is the notion that you actually have a singular customer is false, right? So for our type of buildings, right, we're selling $100 million buildings to big developers. The decision maker is not the developer. It is a consensus-driven decision-making process made up of probably multiple LPs, multiple GPs, construction lenders, insurers, right? Maybe you have some political stuff in it because we're in urban markets. So then you end up with this very different sales strategy, because for each of those stakeholders, they have a different set of objectives that you need to overcome, right? So from a lender, it is downside mitigation. For a developer that is a GP that is making money on a promote, that's upside. Completely different approaches, right? To different mindsets. And how do you address all of those is just a very nuanced and difficult thing if you don't understand how decision-making works when you're selling into that sort of market. I also think that it depends not just on the type of customer and what's behind that customer in terms of investors and lenders. I also think it depends on where we are in the market cycle for what people are prioritizing in terms of their project execution, right? In different points in the market cycle, projects underwrite differently. So you can underwrite cap rate compression and time reduction and all of these different things by deploying a new solution. For example, in a hot market, you'll underwrite an extremely sustainable building at a different cap rate than you do in a tough market. It has nothing to do with the actual performance of the building. It has to do with how the developer is selling the story. And if you don't understand where we are in the macro cycle and how the developer is actually raising the money for the job, convincing their lenders and their equity partners to do the job, the value proposition that you pitch on will be different. And I think that is just very important to understand, is like a developer is not a single agent, and they are maximizing different things depending on where we are in the sort of macro.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah. So don't try to be somebody who's selling a product or a solution, but yeah, that's a very, because automatically you might think that, okay, now we are productizing the whole thing, why not sell the product? But that's not the right strategy. Okay, I also had here these public sector programs, because these are something that many countries and cities and often they have these kind of programs that would be uneven, requiring some sort of prefabrication. But maybe what we said previously is also valid here regarding those programs. Okay, so let's move on to risk management. Actually, we have discussed risks already. I don't know if you have anything to add here, but and actually we also discussed recipes for failure. But one risk that I see many companies facing right now is that they have a factory, they have a production line or lines, but there are delays, and those delays are really critical from this kind of production, that they have been planning and starting producing something, and then there will be delays because of some decision making or something like that. How can you manage those kind of risks which are outside your influence, which you cannot influence?
Well, I think that this is where some of the flaws in a lot of the business models come in, right? Like, you don't take on risks that you can't mitigate. Like that's just like, I think, sort of like good business, right? Like, and that's not to say you can't take risks, but you have to have a plan to mitigate them, right? So when it comes to, I'll just give my sort of like examples, right? So we rely on third parties to make sub-assemblies for us, right? We rely on bathroom pod manufacturers and kitchen pod manufacturers. And like, that is a risk that I am taking, that they will deliver stuff on time.
Yeah.
But part of our business model is we own all of the production information needed to build that bathroom pod, kitchen pod, whatever. So that in the event that bathroom pod supplier goes down, we can replace them. We always have financial security on our subassembly suppliers, either through bonding or letters of credit. So we have a financial remedy if that goes down. And this has actually happened on our first project, where we had to replace, actually the first large scale prototype and our first project, where halfway through we swapped suppliers to make sure, like, and we still maintain schedule. And so, like, it's not to say like you can guard against all risks, but your business model has to deeply understand what risks you are taking and if you can mitigate them. And if you can't mitigate them, don't take on the risk, meaning upstream it to your customer, right? Like, make the customer aware of the risk that you can't mitigate, and then they have to be in a position to take that on. That can affect you reputationally, but it will keep the company alive, at least temporarily.
Yeah. So kind of risk sharing or something like that. Yeah, yeah. But that might be a tough thing to sell.
Yeah, we take on all risk and mitigate it. We don't share the risk with the developer.
Yeah, but that's one option you have, maybe in some cases. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Maybe one thought of de-risking, with new clients especially, is make sure that the new clients you're dealing with, that they visit your facilities, they see your production, and they see in your references. They actually, so that they know what to expect. So you actually mitigate the risk of later complaints of not client not actually accepting the quality, or we deal a lot of with lots of mass timber. So clients don't often understand it's timber, it's a living material, and it will have cracks in it, whether you do it one way or the other way. So, but as soon as clients understand and they adopt the view that, okay, it is a living material, then you're de-risking it already. So, and then you can't do much about this risk later on, unless maybe plaster your nice timber, mass timber buildings, but you don't want to do it. So you want to actually, make sure that your client, actually, even if you don't market your product to the client, you should make sure that your client understands your product or your production and your, the quality of your service.
Yeah.
I think part of that is actually, that's interesting, is related to customer experience and the customer journey. Because you're selling, I mean, we talked about you're not really selling a product, maybe you're selling more of a service. But ultimately, there's a client who's shelling out, however many hundreds of millions of dollars to build a building. And typically within architecture and construction, they have no idea what the building is going to be like until it's finished. It's like, oh, here's your key, here's your building. And it's probably like the only industry in the world where you can spend that amount of money on a product, essentially on something, and have no idea about how that something is being developed or how it's going, the progress on it. So I think that there's a big opportunity in bringing, because it's something new and innovative, I think modular housing companies that really bring the customers in and show them, sort of open up and are completely transparent about the process, even when things go wrong. I think there's a big opportunity there to mitigate that risk of, there's a delay at the end of the life cycle where it's like its cost is 10 times more than it would have been at the beginning.
Yeah. Perhaps to add a few ideas, I think flow modules is the worst example of risk management if we look at everything we've done. But what has saved us and enabled us to be now the market leader in Finland eventually was that we had a very committed first customer. When everything went sour, we were able to cooperate and learn and improve our processes and also perhaps just pure luck, but our ownership structure and then the ownership was well funded enough to bear the risk and take the hit and still decide that, okay, it will cost a little bit to go through this, but we will go through this. So then a committed team to actually continue no matter what hardship comes forward. So those three things, despite all mistakes we did in risk management, we were able to go through. But perhaps the biggest mistake we did was that we pushed ourselves towards high volumes too early. And that's something, if there's one thing I would have changed differently, would have been that. No, there's no rush to big volumes. To make sure that the product works, end-to-end warranty time, all that. Be patient about it, because as Andrew said, I believe the comment on MVP. I don't think there's an MVP in this industry, because you have to. The minimum quality is also the maximum quality, so you have to hit it right from the first time.
Yeah. That's a very good point, that high volume, because we saw one company here in Finland with this problem, that they became kind of growing too fast.
Yeah. I would second to Henry's thoughts as well. So I think one of the key thing there is also that to work with partners who understand modular or who understand prefab, and that applies not only to clients, but more so to the architects. So make sure that the architects you're working with understand the benefits of prefab, and or alternatively use the specific, or ask the architects to use the specific software for designing modular buildings. So if you get it wrong at the design phase, it's bloody difficult to mitigate that at the later stage. So make sure that your buildings are designed for modular, and you could use a configure price quote software for that, for example, something that actually gives you a rapid design and rapid costing at the same time, almost in parallel. And these types of software already exist, or you can build your own custom if you really want to. And maybe related to that is, don't innovate in too many areas. So if you have an innovative product or innovative service, don't try to innovate in the business model. Or if you have a very innovative, building typology, don't innovate in the construction method. So if you innovate in two areas, then you're bringing a lot of risk.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. All right. I'm sure that we have touched on many risks, but there are naturally depends on the business and so on, the market, what those risks are. But there are ways to mitigate those, though this is not just on-off business, so that there are ways to navigate. That's what I understand. Okay. Of course, when you have your business up and running and you have customers and your process starts flowing, how do you grow this kind of business sustainably so that you still manage the risks, but what kind of ideas do you have for growth? What is the right way to grow? Is it taking a larger part of the supply chain for yourself, or vertical integration, or vertical kind of business, or what is the way to grow sustainably?
The way I describe our growth strategy is by using the cliched Elon master plan, which is like build an expensive car to build a cheaper car to build a cheaper car. Like that's sort of our approach, which is build in markets like New York, where you can build very competitively at a really, really high price point and deliver a value proposition there, where you don't have to do a ton of buildings. Again, like you don't want to scale too fast. That allows you to then unlock other markets, whether that is lower rise buildings, different geographies, that then allows you to do that. And it's really around find the first segment in the market that you can deliver value on immediately. And once you do that, you get enough reps that you can then expand to other markets, right? Like, and that's sort of how we're thinking about it. We're still in that like Tesla Roadster phase of the business, but we feel one of the things that we believe, and I actually learned this from talking to some other people in Modular, is like the idea of reps is so important. And if you can get enough reps in whatever market that you can start in that allows you to get to the next one, that is the most important thing.
Very good.
I think to tack onto that gym analogy, I would say that because the required expertise in developing modular housing within your team is developed with the company, you can't really find it. It's not like you can hire someone in that exact role that's done exactly your system. You need to really grow your people with the company. And I think the thing you don't want to do is burn people out, like on the first projects, right? Because if that expertise leaves, you're basically starting again, or at least you're gonna slow things down a lot. So educating people and building up the expertise, blended across technology and architecture, engineering, and so forth, and making sure those people stay with you for the ride, I think.
Yeah.
Perhaps one viewpoint on this. Whenever we're talking about pods or modules, in many cases they're big physical things that the cargo or the freight cost is a relevant thing to consider. There's always a geographical area where you can operate efficiently, and that gives you a maximum market or maximum volume that you can go for. And you should have your overall business model, cost structure always, figured out for that size of business. So you don't want to end up in a situation where you build the biggest factory ever, only to discover that there's no enough market because it's so expensive to drive these pods around the Europe or whatever, and that's especially in our case we've really tried to be careful on that because it's expensive to drive bathroom pods around. So and whenever you're talking about pods or volumetric modules, this is always a viewpoint to consider. So you cannot scale globally like in software. So it's a different thing.
Yeah, we have seen in some cases here in Finland, for example, that Finland is too small a market for a certain type of construction, a modular.
Yeah, definitely.
And even the Nordics. So
yeah. And it's always, when you're talking manufacturing, it's always a volume game to be very efficient and successful, because with the scale you get the benefits. So you have to find that sweet spot in that.
all right. Well, maybe to conclude this has been a really fruitful discussion. I think we have touched on many things. Maybe one thing, because we have the strategy in the headline here. One thing that how I've learned to think about strategy. I don't know if you know this strategy diamond idea, but this is something that Hembrick and Fredrickson, I don't know how many years ago, 15 years ago, maybe, they came up with this model for business strategy. I think I've used it many times with our clients, and I think it works really fine. So we have touched on all aspects of this, I think, already. So what are the arenas that you're working on? You have to decide on who's the customer, what is your value proposition, what is your market area, what is the geographic area, what are the vehicles for a strategy, what is the business model, what kind of decisions you make on what kind of products or value chains, and what is your way to move forward, what kind of partnerships and customer relationships and so on. What are your differentiators? That is something that we didn't discuss too much. I think that is something that every company has to come up with their own differentiators, but still, that is something that you have to consider, because you're competing against other modular companies, but also the traditional way of doing business. And then there's the staging and pacing. What is the right way to scale? What kind of stages you are in and involved in, and what you have to do in different stages. And finally, of course, what is the economic logic? How do you make money sustainably? How do you grow, and so on? So I think we have covered pretty well these aspects of this strategy diamond. Or do you have something to add to this?
I think there's one thing I could add on strategy wise. At least for us, this has been very, very important. When we talk about modular or modularity in the construction industry, in many cases we think volumetric modules, or we think products or components. But modularity is actually about interfaces, and this has been very important for us to really understand that in depth, because the biggest reason for our customers buy from us is it has nothing to do with the bathroom inside the pod. It's just bathroom, tiles and sink. Why they buy from us is that we are the only one who has invested in the interfaces for other structures of the building. And in our team we talk that our competitors in Europe, they talk a lot about the inside of the pod, but we focus 90% of our customer dialogue on the outside of the pod, because that's what you deal with on site. So that idea has helped us a lot in customer value and differentiation. So at least something something that worked for us.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for adding that. Any comments?
No, thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah,
Really
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Yeah, thank you, and let's keep in touch. If you want to network with modular construction experts, join Prefab Pioneers at birdflocks.com. See you there.